All right, let's talk about one of the most brilliant and brutal empire builders in all of history. I mean, this is a guy who basically forged a new world order. But then everything he built was threatened by the mystery of his own disappearance. We're digging into the incredible story of Sargon II. I mean, think about this for a second. It's the ultimate historical puzzle, right? How does the world's most powerful king just vanish? Picture it. You're the absolute ruler of the known world, you're an invincible warrior king, everybody thinks you're divinely chosen. And then one day, you ride out for what's supposed to be a minor battle, and you are just never seen again. And that's the core of this whole story. For Sargon II of Assyria, this shocking end, it wasn't just some personal tragedy. Oh no, it was seen as a cosmic catastrophe, something that threatened to unravel everything he had ever built. So, to really get a grip on his life, we actually have to start with his death. It sounds backwards, I know, but his ending is so bizarre, so shocking, that it completely reshaped how his own people, his own empire, saw him. The facts alone are just jarring. So, it's 705 BC. After 17 straight years of relentless victory, the great Sargon II is killed. And get this, it's not in some epic, world-changing clash of titans. Nope. It's in a tiny little skirmish against some minor rebel way out in the remote mountains of a place called Tabal. That's in modern-day Turkey. But believe it or not, the military defeat, that wasn't even the real catastrophe. This next part was. His body was lost. In the total chaos of the battle, the Assyrians had to retreat, and they were forced to abandon the corpse of their divine king to the enemy. It was never, ever recovered. And for the Assyrians, you have to understand, this was so much more than a tragedy. It was a full-blown theological crisis. An unburied king. That meant his spirit was doomed to just wander the underworld, tormented for all of eternity. It was seen as undeniable proof that the gods hadn't just abandoned Sargon, they had actively cursed him for some terrible, hidden sin. So that raises a huge question, right? How did a king who was apparently destined for such a cursed end get to be so incredibly powerful in the first place? Well, his story begins not with some kind of divine blessing, but with a good old-fashioned grab for power. Yeah, Sargon's reign kicked off in total shadow and controversy. The official story was that he was the son of a previous great king, but the historical evidence, it points pretty strongly to him being a usurper. He most likely seized the throne from his own brother during a palace coup, right in the middle of a lot of internal turmoil. And his very first move as king? It was an absolute masterstroke of propaganda. I mean, he's facing a huge legitimacy crisis, right? So what does he do? He picks a name that does all the work for him. He calls himself Sargon, or Sharukin, which literally means the true king. How brilliant is that? It's like writing your own 5-star review and then making it your official title. Then, he just flooded the empire with inscriptions that spun this whole new narrative. He wasn't a usurper. No. He was divinely chosen. In his own words, the chief god Ashur personally picked him for the job. Hey, if you can't rely on your bloodline, you might as well claim a direct line to the heavens, right? So, okay, with his legitimacy problems sort of papered over, Sargon set out to prove his worth in the one place that mattered most to the Assyrians, the battlefield. And his record was just staggering. His entire reign was this whirlwind of near constant, brilliantly executed military campaigns. He finished the conquest of Israel, he crushed enemy coalitions in the west, he neutralized his great northern rival Urartu, and, this is the big one, he conquered the ancient and incredibly powerful kingdom of Babylon. And he ruled with this ruthless efficiency. Take Samaria, the capital of Israel. After conquering it, his own records state that he deported exactly, and he gives the exact number, 27,290 of its citizens. He just scattered them all across his empire. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just random punishment. This was a cold, calculated state policy. But don't mistake him for just a brute. The man was a brilliant strategist. Just look at his campaign against his rival, the mountain kingdom of Urartu. He didn't just charge in headfirst. No. First, he spent years, methodically securing all the surrounding territories to completely isolate them. Then, he launched this totally unexpected attack through a treacherous mountain pass, sacking their most sacred religious city and just shattering their will to fight. It was a total strategic masterpiece. Okay, so conquering all that land is one thing, but actually controlling a vast multi-ethnic empire, that takes a whole different kind of genius. It takes a genius for building systems. And Sargon perfected this really flexible system of imperial control. So for places that were strategically vital or, a bit rebellious, like Samaria or Babylon, he imposed direct rule. Just bam, you're now an Assyrian province. But for other territories, he used indirect rule, letting the local kings stay on their thrones, as long as they stayed loyal and, of course, paid their tribute. And this is where we see his infamous policy of mass deportation for what it really was, a calculated tool of social engineering. It wasn't just random cruelty. The goals were super specific. Shatter local resistance, get skilled workers for his big building projects, and, over generations, create a whole new, blended imperial identity that was loyal only to him and the Assyrian state. So all of this power, all this wealth, all this control, it all came together in one single colossal project. He decided to build a brand new capital city, Dur-Sharrukin, which means Fortress of Sargon, from scratch on totally empty land. And this thing wasn't just a city, it was a statement. Every single wall, every palace, was designed to be the perfect center of his new universe. It was the physical manifestation of the world order he had created. So he'd done it. He had created a perfect empire, a perfect capital, and this perfect image of himself as an invincible, divinely chosen king. And then, poof, he vanished. And here is the ultimate crushing irony of his entire life. The master of propaganda, the guy who meticulously controlled every single aspect of his own story, was ultimately defeated by an ending he couldn't write. His embarrassing death in a pathetic little skirmish and the loss of his body, it just completely shattered the myth of divine favor that he had spent his entire reign building. The fallout was immediate, and it was profound. His own son and successor, a guy named Sennacherib, was so terrified of the curse that was now attached to his father's name that he completely abandoned that magnificent new capital, Dur-Sharrukin. Just left it. He moved the entire court back to the old city of Nineveh. And in his own official records, he almost never even mentioned his father's name. When he did, he just talked about the sin of Sargon. So Sargon's story really forces us to ask a pretty fundamental question. Here's a man who achieved absolute power. He built one of the greatest empires in history. But in the end, what was his legacy defined by? Not his 17 years of nonstop triumph, but by the one disastrous day he couldn't control. It really makes you think. While power can definitely build an empire, it's something else, something much trickier that actually secures a legacy.